I'm CK. Tonight we've got another LFO. This one is the NO or NOH, I don't know how to pronounce it. Modular Cycles Quad LFO with lots of interesting things going on with it. This is a suggestion from a viewer. Thank you, The Word, for pointing this one out. It looks like it's going to be a fun kit. We'll put it together and see how it LFOs. Hope you enjoy the video. The bag, again from thonk.co.uk. I don't know where NOH or NO is from. Maybe it'll give me some information inside when I get there. But let's see. Let's open it up and take a look at the circuit board and front panel. I know what's on the circuit board already, but we'll look at the front panel first. So it's NOH with the H underlined, so I still don't know what that means. It's a Creative Commons license for all the software and the device, which is nice. So this is Cycles. It's got the LFO, an 8-4-bit DAC mix. I know there's triangle out, there's square wave out, no sine wave. That's okay, we can live without a sine wave. LEDs on them. Let me see what's up here. I'm not quite sure what's up here. I think these are speed knobs, and that's low and high might be switches, but we'll find out here in a second. First, as we look at the board, the logic board, this is January 2023. That's pretty quick, pretty new. You can see we've got a bunch of surface mount components already on the board. In fact, the logic board looks like we've only got the power stuff on it, the power connector, protection diode, and smoothing capacitors. Wow, this is pretty good. I like the way they did this. His decoupling caps are right up against the pins. That's the way you use a decoupling cap. Let's see what we've got. I can't read this number. So yeah, we're not going to do much on this board, but put the pin headers and the power section on. But that's okay. Let's look at the controls board. And this is the logic board has been updated in January. This is from October 2022. Yeah, so this is switches, high and low frequency. Pots, 2 more switches, which are mix switches. I guess I'm gonna say that we're switching various things into this mix. I don't know if these are 3-position switches or 2-position switches. We'll figure that out in a couple of minutes. And they come out that jack, and these are all the individual LFO outs with LEDs above them. And yeah, it's interesting that there's a 4-bit DAC coming out of there. I probably will never use that, but it's good to have it on the board just because. Now let's see what's in the package. Then there's a bunch of pin headers, more pin headers. Ooh, it looks like he cut some of them for us, which is always nice. Power cable, nothing too unusual about that. Let me put the mechanical components in this bin. Here we've got panel nuts, potentiometers, 100K. Seem nice enough. I'm going to put all the jacks in this bin too. Knobs, they're good knobs. They're just press fit, but at least they do have a flat side. jacks, power protection diodes, power connector, knobs and jacks and knobs. Our LEDs, these are square LEDs with a little shoulder on them. Yeah, this will be a pretty quick build. I wasn't thinking about getting it done tonight, but I may very well do so. So why do I have 3 pin headers? Let me see what we've got here. These better be long enough, so these are not quite long enough, so we've got to do this pin header, which of course goes on the back. This pin header, then 4 pins from this extra pin header, which is all fine. As long as I don't mind cutting male pin headers, cutting female pin headers makes my hair even grayer than it already is, and I'm going to have to anyway. Huh, look at that. But that's all fine. The boards look very good. Again, they're surface mount style boards, so they will be very easy to solder on. So that's it. Not a lot in the build. Oh, well, I'm sorry, and here's the, oh, there's some more decoupling caps, or I guess that's what they would be. One more electrolytic. I mean, 2 electrolytics, then the ceramics. Huh. Where do they go? Do they go in here? I didn't notice a spot for them. No, they're not going on there. Going on here? Oh yeah, it's capacitors between. So just a little comment on the capacitors here. The capacitors here set the rates, rate ranges for low or high. So you can change them out, put other capacitors in, play around with it if you want, and see what works best for you. I'm going to go with the stock ones. You might remember we did this the other week with that other LFO that I can't remember the name of, that I changed some of the capacitors around to get different rates. But we're not going to do that this time. We're just going to go with the caps he provided. So let's start. The build guide is fine. Obviously this is a relatively straightforward build. There's not a lot of question on what goes where, since there's not a lot of components and all the components have their values marked, which is always good. So we'll just go and put the diodes on first. Polarity matters for diodes, of course. And as I look at this, I realize, I'm going to double check before I say it out loud. Yep, there are absolutely no resistors in this build, so we will not have any resistor time tonight. Let me go ahead and solder these down before I go further. Remember, these have the thick old leads, so if you linger a little bit longer with your iron on it, that's okay to make sure the leads get very hot and we get good solder adhesion. Next, we'll pop the power connector on, and it is a keyed power connector, and there is an indicator on the board where the slot for the key should go. However, because we are, wow, that's very stiff. That's a stiff insert. since we are very paranoid, we're going to take the power connector and see if the key actually lines up correctly, and it does with the key in the right place. The red stripe is with the red stripe indicator on the circuit board. Now with that being so tight, I don't have to worry about it being aligned at all, because it's not going to slip at all. So I'll just solder the pins down. Okay, what does he want us to do next? Now we do the two caps. He's got two big blues, we've got two blacks. They're the same values, of course. These are both, what are they actually? They are, I can't, 10 microfarad, 35 volt. Is that what you say on the front, or is something cut off? Oh, it does not actually have the value of the caps on this board. That's interesting. They have the value of the caps on this board and the other components like the pots, but he didn't put the values on this board. Interesting. Now I don't fight stuff out of this paper tape. I just clip the leads, because if you start fighting with it, you get the leads all splayed out, and it's just not fun. The only thing is, when you cut them out, you don't have the long lead to guide you. You have to rely on the white stripe on the cap, or the stripe on the cap, to tell you where the negative and positive leads go. Now we'll do the female pin headers on this one. Actually, I'm not sure which one he wants the female pin headers on. It says the hardware PCB. I'm going to say, yeah, by hardware PCB he means the knobs and pots board. So let me get my female pin header cutting pliers. So we will see how far we have to cut. I think we have to cut 3 pins off, and because it's a female pin header, we will sacrifice a pin. It's unavoidable. I'm sure somebody can do it better than me and make it avoidable, but I cannot cut female pin headers without sacrificing a pin. And I'm going to just double check that I did it right. Yes, I did. Male pin headers, I don't sacrifice pins. Female headers, I do. Okay, doke. Put these all on there. Where they go. Make sure they all have all the pins they need to have. And I'm going to do 1 pin on each. Now I'll check for perpendicularity. That one's perpendicular, this one is not. So I will heat that solder bead up again. And it's still not, because I glanced up at the camera while I was supposed to be letting it cool, but I didn't. Okay, we'll get all the rest of these pins. And now we'll put the rate caps on. Should have 4 of each, and we do. I might have chosen to do the pin headers after I did the components, because it's going to be a little tight over here. It's not going to be much of a problem, but if you're going to build one of these, and you haven't done a lot of soldering, or you're not necessarily comfortable with being right up against the edge or something, I would go ahead and populate the board and then put these pin headers on. Again, it really only matters for the securing lugs on the pots. So it's not a huge deal, just I would do it the other way. Where did I put the 22s? Oh, we can go ahead and put all the hardware on. And by the way, these switches are 2 positions, so it's kind of a matrix thing to mix your LFOs together. We'll see how that goes when we demo this. Let's go ahead and put the switches on first to see how tightly they fit in the holes. Reasonably tightly. They're not going to fall out, that's for sure. Now we'll put the panel on so we can get this aligned for soldering. When you're going to put the front panel on with a bunch of switches, have all the switches go in one direction. You'll just find that so much easier to get things aligned if you do that. So that's all down. Now I'm going to take one of the panel nuts for the pot up here and finger tighten that. Actually, I'm not going to do that quite yet. I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to go up here and solder one of the support legs on that pot. Solder my finger briefly. Fortunately, I've burnt myself so many times over the years, I don't have any nerve endings in my fingers. Then I'm going to do one of the pins on this jack at the bottom. Now we'll come back around. Now we'll finger tighten this nut. So now the jacks and pots are all secure. The switches are a little loose because I chose not to put the backing nuts back here, which would have made them a little snugger, but I don't particularly, I just call it my orneriness. I don't care to do that. I'm going to put some foam down for those and solder one pin on each of the switches first so they won't go anywhere. Now I'm going to take the panel back off. Oh, and 2 things I want to point out. First, I didn't say this explicitly. There are 2 low-profile switches here with handles that are about 1/3 the size of that. They go here for the mixer side. The other thing is the jacks. These 8 jacks share a pinhole for the ground pins. Let me show you here in a second after I get this apart. So these, as you can see, these jacks have an individual pin for their grounds. These jacks share one pin for 2 grounds. Now we'll put the LEDs in. Square are negative, square pads are negative, and there's also a flat spot outline on the PCB. So that's 2 ways to tell that you've got the polarity on the LEDs correct. Now I think that that's the last time we'll be taking the front panel off. So let's put it back on again. And you don't have to do it the way I did it. You don't have to do the LEDs separately. It's a thing with me. I want to make sure everything else on the panel is done before I put the LEDs in. Because things can move around and your distance won't be right. Let's see how these go in. I guess they'll go in all the way. Take a look at that. They stick out pretty far, but that's okay. LEDs that stick out beyond the panel are often easier to see from the side. So if you've got a large eurorack rig, or it's on your side while you're doing something else with, say, a turntable or whatever, I actually prefer LEDs that stick out instead of being flush, because then I can see them out without having to move my head all the way over to get straight onto it. So that's all the LEDs down. Now we're going to put the pin headers on this fella. So as I mentioned before, we've got 1 strip, and then we need 4 more from this smaller strip. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, counting out loud is valuable when you're doing things like this. Now what we can do here, and what the author of the build guide would encourage us to do, is to put this all together like so, making sure I'm not fouling any pins. I am there. Let's go on this side. I gotta slide that down a little bit. Oh, come on, where's my little... There it is. It was a little rough cut, so I'll sand the end of the plastic down a little bit, just a hair. Actually, I need more than a hair. I actually need to clip stuff off that. Huh. There we go. Now what we can do at this point is put the 2 boards together like so. I'm going to go ahead and press them all the way in, because why not? Now everything's aligned and we can solder all the pins. The author of the build guide emphasizes, as I certainly would, when you're soldering here, these resistors, surface mount resistors, are very close to these pins, it is very possible for you to brush your soldering iron against them while you're soldering the pins. So be very careful and don't go this side, just go this side. Put all the panel nuts on, again in fast motion because nobody wants to see me spinning panel nuts down. All the panel nuts are on. Let's put the knobs on, and because they've got the flat side cut out, we don't have to worry about getting the index marks in the right place, because they will just do it automatically, which is good for me. Now it'll work smoothly. Let's get the power cable. He does mention in the build guide that you can check for continuity mistakes and so on or at this point. There's no calibration to do on the unit, but you can double check your work if you want to put a meter on it. I will not, because I can see what I've done here. Put the power connector in. So that's the front. It's the side. It's the back. The other side. The top. And the bottom. Now we'll put it in the rack and see how it oscillates. Okay, we're in the rack. May as well power it up, see what happens. LEDs came on. That's a good thing. And let me bring the scope up, and as you can see, the scope is outputting, I'm going to reduce this a little bit. Scope is outputting interesting things. I've got number 1, the top line on the oscilloscope is from the triangle output from LFO1. The bottom is from the square wave output of LFO2, though I'm going to switch that around and make them both off LFO1. Let me try and reduce the time a little bit here. So that's what we're doing right now, and as you can see, the LFO peak and nadir are both aligned with the signal from the square wave for that same LFO. So let's vary it a little bit. Let's turn it up a little bit. There we go. Look, working like an LFO. Let me change the switch here to go high, and now you can see, gosh, that's quite high, isn't it? We'll pull it back some. There seems to be a little, let me look at that again as I move the knob. Let me pull it back a little bit again. Seems to be a little curve on the lead of the, I'm going to go fast again and pull it back. On the forward slope of the triangle wave, there's a little curve. See that? Little curve as I change. And then as I went faster, it was a convex curve. As I was reducing, it was a concave curve as I was increasing. So that's interesting. Now I'm going to do, that's pretty much what you would expect. Let me make some sound, I guess, because this is an audio thing. Let me run my sequencer. I'm going to slow that down. And I'm going to take the output from the LFO and put it into frequency modulation, if I can get these cables sorted out. So that's the sine wave output into there. Change the rate. I'm going to go real low again. I'm going to do another thing here. Yes, you just be quiet for a minute. I'm going to go from the square wave. Let me take the frequency out. I'm going to go from the square wave to gate. You can see it cuts it off very nicely. Now I'm going to increase the speed. So that's simply the LFO triggering gate on the VCA, and that could be useful. So again, fundamentally it's an LFO, 4 LFOs. Which is just dandy. Now what's interesting, or what may be interesting, let's go take the output from the, and this is going into the top line, the yellow line. I'm going to put it into the mixer. And I'm going to mix, should take the triangle wave from 1 and 3 right now and be outputting that. Let me make sure I'm going to the right place. Where am I going to? Following cables. How many times do we follow cables? Okay. So that's what's happening now. Let me slow that down. This is a mix of 1 and 3. And let me go ahead and I'm going to take this out of gate. And I'm going to put this into CV for volt octave on the, where am I? Sorry, I'm mixed up here. I'm going to feed this in to the VCO directly and put the output directly out too. And we should be doing what I think we're doing. Nope, I plugged in the wrong side. Here we go. So this is a little bit of random. I'm going to take the second line out. Now I've got LFO 3 going fast and LFO 1 also going fast. Now I've got one going slow, one going fast. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. Now because it's going negative, that's why the VCO is acting the way it is. Wow, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? I don't even know what that is. So that's the signal mixed from 1 to 3 right now. Take it down, I take 1 all the way down and we're straight 3 right now. Now I'm going to bring 1 back in. Look at that waveform down. So I'm going to switch over to the 4, mix 1 with 4. One and 2, 2 and 4. So that's pretty interesting, isn't it? By mixing the 2 LFO output signals by using these 2 switches into the mix, we can get interesting waveforms like that.
But fundamentally, if we go back to simply being an LFO, to find LFO, both as a triangle wave and as a square wave, even though as you can see, at least at this level, the peak is got a little ripple in it, not much, but a little bit, just interesting. So that's it. It's a 4-output LFO with triangle waves and square waves. I wish it was had 4 sine waves. I'm kind of sad that the last 2 LFOs I've done don't have sine waves. So they're all 4 independent, low and high, and you can change the capacitors on the board. The build guide has some suggestions on what you might want to do to change the rates, and then you can mix them in interesting ways. And then the 4-bit DAC is simply going to put out, let's see, I think I can do that to gate on, let me reconfigure a little bit. Where'd my audio out signal go? Where are you? What are you plugged into? Okay, we're going to plug it back in to here, and I'm going to put the 4-bit DAC signal into the VCA I've got right here. See what that sounds like. Because it's going high based on the interaction between the 4 LFOs in a binary sense. And I've still got one signal going out for the note value. I'll put that back where it was. I like that better. So this is all interesting. That gives you a random gate, basically a random gate or a random high and low signal. Or pseudo-random. It's not really random. The build guide or user manual describes how those are summed to put out signal through that port. But it's a fine LFO. It does a great job as a simple LFO, and the ability to mix more than mix 2 LFOs together to get an interesting signal output out the back end is also pretty cool. And as you saw, it was a pretty straightforward build. There's obviously some bits up here that took a little bit of time to put in, but it's straightforward and gives you a good product in the end. I hope you enjoyed the video.